All right, peace. What's going on? Hey, thanks for your time. I appreciate it. Like, subscribe. Most importantly, pay attention. All right, so I got a new one for y'all, man. I got a new one for y'all. This video is entitled "Fascist Anyone?" with a question mark. Fascist anyone? I guess that's how you would say it. But with that being said, you know, one day I was thinking. When I said the other day, that was yesterday. I was thinking to myself, I was thinking of people of the same cloth, right? People who are cut from the same cloth. Um, Hitler popped in my mind, and I was thinking of his intentions, uh, his direction, what he was trying to accomplish, in essence and in its entirety. And then, obviously he had him and Mussolini, they were associates somewhat, right? And so I correlated. I could see correlation in regards to their ideology. So, with that being said, I ran into a word that I've obviously heard of, but I've never paid too much attention to until I started looking at these people for who they are, reading about them, and or at least I don't want to say who they are. I don't know who they are, but at least what I'm reading about them. So with that being said, I ran into the word fascist. Okay, and I started seeing a lot of actions that correlated and ran parallel with their ideologies. People like Mussolini, people like Hitler, people like Franco, um, uh, Pinochet, whatever his name is. You know what I'm saying? Or I think that's how you pronounce it. So there's a correlation of ideology and strategy, right? And not only strategy, but also um, uh, direction. There is there is always, you'll see patterns in these things. You know, even when it comes to really anything and everything you do, after a while, if you pay attention enough, or or there is some strong level of awareness, consciousness, you see patterns. You see patterns. You see these patterns stick out to you. You know what I'm saying? And the people who understand what I'm saying, they get what I'm saying. The people who see things like that will understand what I'm saying. For example, there's some people in regards to arithmetic that are geniuses with numbers. They can just put numbers together, add numbers, divide them, multiply them, just like that in their head. Why? Is because some people, they even say they see the numbers in their head, but cognitively they can make these connections a lot quicker than the average person. But the reason why is because their brain, I forgot the name of it, but basically, in a nutshell, there's electrical currents that are is what is transferring information, you know, throughout your brain, right, from your brain to the rest of your body. These are little shots of electric current, and so the stronger, the stronger the brain blood vessel, or I forgot the name of it, but it's basically the tube, right? It's basically the cable in which the electric current shoots information. The thicker that is, I want to say it's the neuron. I want to say it's the neurons, but the thicker that is, the thicker that is, the stronger the current can be, which means the stronger the information can be. You understand what I'm saying? So, with that being said, some people, their connections are stronger, which their cables, which connect their thoughts, actions, which is running this electric, charge that carries your thoughts and actions. Um, their cables are stronger, right? They're thicker, and when this happens, like I said, more information can be sent. For example, if you look at it now, if you take a coax electrical cable, right? You plug that in. That's considered low voltage, right? And there's only a certain amount of energy, of power that can go through that, of information. Coax, which is cable. That's like a cable wire. But now, if you take a fiber optic cable, right? That's a different structure of cable, which can carry more information, which is faster. You see what I'm saying? So that's basically the same thing in the brain. Is that that some people have stronger connections. You can obviously manifest, cultivate, strengthen these things, just like you strengthen a muscle, through where the cables that carry the information are stronger to carry stronger information, right? So, with that being said, um, for me, I started seeing these connections, right? I started seeing these connections with these dictators and all the shit that they call them and whatever. I'm not saying these people are innocent. These motherfuckers is bad. Don't get me wrong, you know. But I started seeing the connections, nevertheless. And so we're going to go through those connections and we're going to correlate them to today's society and today's leaders. And it's going to be kind of sad, to be honest with you. And the reason why I'm doing this is because, this last election, we have the president we have. I started seeing these patterns. I started seeing an attitude of authoritative type of mentality, right? Somebody's just gonna come in and just try to tell you what it is, and you have nothing to do with anything, right? When I started seeing that within the current president is when I started noticing the pattern. Now, I'm gonna show y'all this pattern, and obviously it's like, y'all can agree with me, y'all don't have to agree with me, but you are more than free to go do your own research in regards to it. And like I said, lend me your ear, and we'll see where it goes. But one thing for sure is, I'm not pulling this shit out of the stars. I'm gonna correlate why these patterns hold so true, So with that being said, let's get to it. We're gonna start in the basics, all right? We're gonna start with the basics. So there was a political scientist by the name of Dr. Lawrence Britt. Well, he's not really a doctor. I did some research on him, and he ain't no goddamn doctor. This man is more or less a novelist, a political novelist. He's a writer, and he had come up with these 14 characteristics of fascism, right? And so these are the elements that consist of the ideology and the intent of fascism. So before we break down the characteristics and the elements of fascism, let's break down just the pure definition, right? Just the basic definition of what it is, right? And what are we looking at? So fascism is a form of radical authoritarian nationalism characterized by dictatorial power, forcible suppression of opposition, and control of industry and commerce. Okay, do you understand what that means? So fascism is a form of radical authoritarian nationalism, right? So there is a hierarchy, and it's an authoritative hierarchy, and it's very patriotic, right? Characterized by a dictatorial power. Characterized by a dictatorial power, forcible suppression of opposition, and control of industry and commerce. Okay? So, and they obviously say which came in prominence in early 20th century Europe. The first fascist movement emerged in Italy during World War I, and before it spread to other European countries. Now we know what the definition is. I'm gonna go through it one more time, just because I did kind of stutter through it the last time. I'm sitting there trying to do something else, trying to multitask, which obviously it didn't work out too well. So, fascism is a form of radical authoritarian nationalism characterized by dictatorial power, forcible suppression of opposition, and control of industry and commerce. Okay, so now we know what that is. Now, let's break down the 14 characteristics of fascism, written by Lawrence Britt. I'd rather call him by what he is and not by what he wants us to call him. Mr. Fake ass doctor. Lying ass motherfucker. Anyway, alright, so Dr. Lawrence Britt, he recently wrote an article about fascism, and it's called Fascism Anyone, and which is where I got my title from. I'm gonna go ahead and just do it. Makes sense. Studying the fascist regimes of Hitler, Germany, Mussolini in Italy, Franco in Spain, Suharto in Indonesia, and Pinochet in Chile, Dr. Britt found they all had 14 elements in common. He calls these the identifying characteristics of fascism. Now, the excerpt is in accordance with the magazine's policy. Alright, so these are the 14 characteristics. Now, before we go any further, what we're going to do is we're going to break them down one by one. And when we do that, we're going to compare them to what's going on in today's society and today's leaders, right? So we're going to start with number one, and then we're going to compare that to today's society and today's leaders. And we'll just keep going. Since we have 14 of them, there might be, not even might be, there's going to be a part two. So I'll probably stop at 7. And then part 2 will be 14. Boom, you know, the rest of them. All right, so let's go, folks. Let's jump on in. Let's get it. All right, so now, let me think. Let me see here. Okay, boom. I got people trying to text me and shit. I need to get back to it. All right, so now the 14 characteristics are, right, powerful and continuing nationalism. Now, fascist regimes tend to make constant use of patriotic mottos, slogans, symbols, songs, and other paraphernalia. Flags are seen everywhere, as are flag symbols on clothing and in public displays. Alright? So, let's go ahead and break that down. Do we see that in today's society? And and do we see that in today's society? Fascist anyone? Now, is making America great again racist? Question mark. Right? This is what this article covers, because this correlates to a powerful and continuing nationalism, right? Because fascist regimes, they tend to make constant use of patriotic mottos, slogans, symbols, songs, and other paraphernalia. Flags are seen anywhere. Flags are the symbols of flags, and boom, that's what I see right there. A slogan, flag, symbols, all over. All right, well, let's get to the article. Daryl Davis, a black musician who has made a practice of befriending members of the Ku Klux Klan, says he knows exactly what racists hear in the slogan, "Make America Great Again." Donald Trump won the election on one word only, and that word was again, Davis says. When was again? Davis asked during an interview at his home in May, discussing race relations in the age of President Trump. Was it back when I was drinking from a separate water fountain? Was it when I couldn't eat in the restaurant over there? Make America great again before I had equality? Trump told the Washington Post he thought the slogan in 2012 and trademarked it immediately, although similar words have been used by politicians as far back as President Ronald Reagan. President Bill Clinton is on record as having used it during the presidential campaign in 1991, although not as an official slogan, yet in 2008 while campaigning for his wife he noted, "If you are a white Southerner, you know exactly what it means, don't you?" Is it possible that Trump was elected to the presidency with a racial charged slogan? Or are supporters and critics just hearing what they want to hear? Now, Christian Picciolini, a former neo-Nazi who now works to help other white supremacists leave the movement, says the slogan fits into the alt-right's efforts to make its message more attractive by toning down the rhetoric. I'm gonna run that back. Christian Picciolini, a former neo-Nazi who now works to help other white supremacists leave the movement, he says that the slogan fits into the alt-right's efforts to make its message more attractive by toning down the rhetoric. That was a concerted effort, Picciolini says, if an informational video for Vox News. We knew we were turning more people away than we could eventually have on our side if we just softened the message. These days, with our political climate, we see a lot of coded language or dog whistles. Picciolini uses Picciolini's use of dog whistle refers to a subtle message meant to be understood only by a particular group of people, like a whistle pitched high enough that a dog might hear it, but a human would not. Y'all with me? Y'all with me? He said, "We knew." This is Picciolini, Christian Picciolini, the former neo-Nazi. He said that we knew we were turning more people away than we could eventually have on our side if we just softened the message. These days, with our political climate, we see a lot of coded language or dog whistles. Now, Picciolini's use of dog whistle refers to a subtle message meant to be understood only by a particular group of people, like a whistle pitched high enough that a dog might hear it, but a human would not. So, make America great again, Picciolini asks rhetorically. Well, to them, that means make America white again. In June 2016, a Tennessee politician even put that on a billboard. Rick Tyler, running for a congressional seat in mostly white Polk County, Tennessee, explained that his Make America White Again billboard was meant to evoke the mood of the 1950s America, when television shows idealized the image of the happy white family. In a Facebook post, Tyler said, "It was an America where doors were left unlocked. Violent crime was a mere fraction of today's rate of occurrence. There were no carjackings, home invasions, Islamic mosques, or radical jihadist sleeper cells." It's funny. It's funny that he says that. You know, what I think of, he's talking all that shit about 1950s America. Look at all the mass shootings that have happened. The mass shootings ain't got nothing to do with jihads or whatever, jihadists or Muslims. Or not. It's all white people. It's all white people doing them shootings in their neighborhoods. So that just don't make any fucking sense to me at all. But back to it. Okay, so Tyler's billboard quickly drew negative national attention and was taken down within a few days. Right? See, look, this is Rick Tyler's campaign billboard. Make America white again. Rick Tyler for Congress.com. He said, "Fuck it. If Donald gonna do it, shit, I might as well get it in myself, right?" These motherfuckers. So just thank you for showing me your true colors. That's all I got to say. But with that being said, we're going back in. Now, I'm going to leave that up there. Now, President Trump says he merely meant the slogan to refer to better economic times. Better economic times. I see. And when America, at least at that time, what the time he's referring to, that is when even I don't think civil rights even existed. So he's looking at it better economic times when the minority race was still segregated, right? "I felt the jobs were hurting," Trump told the Post in January. "I looked at the many times of illness our country had, and whether it's at the border, whether it's security, whether it's law and order, or lack of law and order." Trump said the slogan inspired me because to me it meant jobs. It meant industry and it meant military strength. It meant taking care of our veterans and meant so much. David Axelrod, chief political strategist for former President Barack Obama, credits Trump with understanding his audience and crafting a message whose flexibility was part of its appeal. Trump, Axelrod told the Post, understood that the market that he was trying to reach, you can't deny him that, he added. In terms of galvanizing the market that he was talking to, he did it single-mindedly and ingeniously. You know, for me, it's funny that people, okay, we want to commend that, we want to compliment that, then we might as well compliment Hitler for, for rising to the ranks and committing such atrocities. I mean, that took a brilliant fucking mind, didn't it? Right? I mean, that took some fucking thinking, some strategy. So fuck, we might as well compliment him on this, on how he knew how to target his market, right? We might as well. I mean, what the fuck? What's the difference? We gotta give. That's what I'm saying. Like my thing is, how do we compliment and commend people who entertain negativity on a mass level? We gotta give them that. We gotta give them that. So then, who else can I think of who's a fucking just a nasty piece of shit in society, but has gained a following, right, in masses? And so what we need to compliment them because they were able to hone in on a perverted side of people, and they were able to manifest enough followers to idealize him. So we need to commend him because of how he was able to do that. That's what we need to do. What's his name? Charles Manson. Charles Manson had people running around killing for him. So we need to commend him because hey, he knew how to he knew how to control people. We got to give him credit on that. At least he knew how to control people. That's a talent most people don't have. So shit, he's fucking incredible. He's a great man, right? Is that what we need to do? Commend people for the atrocities that they've committed, just because they were able to galvanize people of like-mindedness, even though that like-mindedness stood for nothing but hate. How the fuck do we do that? But now how we doing that is we're normalizing. Because if we did that, if we said, look, we got to give Hitler credit for being able to come from nothing, take over the whole country, and then kill a bunch of fucking Jews. He's a genius, right? He was able to completely convince all those people. He was able to target his market. Should we normalize what the fuck he did? The same way we're normalizing how Trump targeted the racist fucking backwards people of the United States, and if not just the racist backwards motherfuckers, the racist conservative people too, because they're the ones that actually run the country. The conservative racist people are the ones that actually run the country. And then the low income ones are, they're just the foot soldiers, so to speak. You know what I mean? Well, my point is, do we normalize this shit? Do we normalize the fact that someone was able to rein them in? Where do we normalize the fact that someone was able to come up with such a subliminal phrase of "Make America Great Again," as if when it was great, it was a time of all prosperity? And then when we hear that a neo-Nazi, an ex-neo-Nazi, who helps other Nazis try to get out the movement, who see the fucking light, and I give him credit for that, and so he's telling us that just means, no, make it when it was back in them days where black people on one side of town didn't own shit and white people were prospering off their fucking back and anybody else they're fucking exploiting. That's what he's talking about. That's what he said. That's what that means to us. That means make America white again. And so much so, a fucking congressman in Tennessee went and got a billboard made and said, fuck it, since Trump, his leader, saying something that blatant, he said, I'm going to take it a step further and just say, make America white again, because that's exactly what the fuck it means to them, right? And he called it a dog whistle, right? Is that it's something for the nationalists, the KKK motherfuckers, the alt-rights to understand subliminally, while the rest of us just go, what the fuck are you talking about? What are you talking about? Or the rest, or some idiots going, yeah, that's right, man. We need to get back to that place. Well, you don't realize that the place that they're referring to is the place where, yes, of course, you were comfortable in society. If I'm talking to a white person, but if I'm talking to a black person, that means you weren't comfortable. You still weren't comfortable in society. If anything, you were less comfortable than you are now in society. That's the time that he's referring to. When I hear it, that's what it sounds like to me. The ex-neo-Nazi guy, he says the same thing. Because at first, too, I was going, well, maybe, hold on, I'm not going to jump to conclusions. But I thought about it, I said, well, civil rights was in the 60s. So I know he ain't talking about after the 60s. Because it was a shitstorm ever since. Now, before there was, World War II in the 40s, right? Um, the mafia days, all through the goddamn 50s, 40s, 30s, and even the 20s. That's mafia time. So, what time is he referring to? Because any other time, like I said, black people was under the foot, still under the foot, way under, like way under the foot of the fucking man, or anybody else for that matter. Any other, there was. I can't think of a time where it was that great. I mean, I can't say for me. So that's why I know he's speaking for himself, and he's speaking for his own. That's the only time I can think of. I mean, that's the only thing I can think that comes to my mind. So, with that being said, we're gonna move on. But like I said, I love the fact that they talk about that as if we should condone how somebody was brave enough to gather a bunch of negative fucking thought and manifest that. Just because he was able to target his fucking market, negative or not, we should say that shit is cool and commendable. Like, so then let's normalize it. See, that's the dangerous thing about it, is that that's normalizing the detriment of the ultimate intent of this, wrangling all this fucking hatred together. Because that's all he did, was just wrangle a bunch of people who didn't like other people. He wrangled a bunch of rich people who don't like other people, who don't like other races of people. He wrangled a bunch of poor people who don't like other races of people. He wrangled black people who don't like black people. He wrangled white people who don't like white people. You bringing them all up. You don't like some shit? Come with me. That's exactly what the fuck happened. I mean, I just don't see anything different. All right, so who is Trump's market? Now, according to surveys, at its core are white men in the blue-collar sector, the demographic with the most to lose when women and minorities start gaining more rights and earning power over the past few decades. I'm going to repeat that. Who is Trump's market? According to the surveys, at its core are white men in the blue-collar sector. And that is the demographic with the most to lose when women and minorities start gaining more rights and earning power over the past few decades. But people who find promise in Make America Great Again come from more than just that narrow category. Jason Rankin, a real estate agent in Knoxville, Tennessee, describes his thoughts about the slogan this way. Make America Great Again to me means at least the following things: less national debt, more secure borders, more freedom of speech, more gun rights, more job opportunities across the country, but especially in rural areas, higher GDP, stronger national security, a stronger military, more money in every American's bank account. Okay, so let's break that down. Mr. Jason Rankin. Less national debt. Okay, so how does that help the domestic imbalance of distribution of wealth? Right? If there's a national debt problem, we have a national imbalance of job opportunity problems, unemployment rates in African American and minority communities. So how do we fix national debt when the unemployment rates in non-white communities are always low? How do we do that? Okay, so let's move on to his other point that meant to him Make America Great Again. And then also in regards to this less national debt, the times of less national debt was less civil rights for African Americans and minorities. So if that's the time he wants to go back to, that's, like I said, that's the time when there was more racism going on and more blatant racism going on than now. Which now I'm saying that it's just not blatant. It's still there. It's just more covert. Now, more secure borders. I can't think of a time when this immigration thing was. Obviously, there's always been immigration issues here and there, but my point is that it's never been as rampant as it is now. Um, and then if we look at it, they say more secure borders when a lot of the labor force of this country is by Mexican people and illegal Mexican people at that. So I don't understand how, if we don't want the people here, then why are we hiring them when they get here? Why are we hiring them when they get here? So more freedom of speech. Okay, so does that mean just for you or for all people? Because usually when it comes to freedom of speech, which is why we had things like civil rights, is because that wasn't allotted to most people. Gun rights, same thing. I can compare that to minority demographics here in the city or just nationwide, and it's pretty self-explanatory in regards to who has majority gun rights. More job opportunities. I touched on that just a little bit ago in regards to the unemployment rates in the African American and other minority communities. So more job opportunities across the country would be great for everybody. But my point is that there was always been a steady and a low maintenance of unemployment rates and percentages when it comes to African American and minority groups. Higher GDP, same thing. If there's not balance of distribution of wealth, if there's not balance of unemployment opportunities, you ain't gonna find no higher GDP. The only way you gonna find that higher GDP is when you got people picking cotton or you got incarceration rates nice and high and things of that nature. And so you can't; these things can't happen on the backs and on the necks of people. The only way these things can happen, and especially happen in a way of longevity, is when people understand the fact that there has to be a balance of the distribution of opportunity, authority, and most importantly, of wealth. Stronger national security and a stronger military, more money in every American's bank account. Well, I gotta tell you, bro. I don't know to you who you consider American because there's definitely a certain amount of people who have plenty of money in their bank accounts, and it's been like that for them for a long time. So, Tony Gioia, an auto engineer in Washington, D.C., said Make America Great Again has a vision to it, as well as a reference to that. To him, speaks of greater economic prosperity in the past and financial lives unburdened of crippling debt. And like I said, that economic prosperity in the past, if that was a prosperity that was a balance of that wealth and everybody had it, I'm with you. But like I said, man, I don't remember a time where nationally all demographics and all races have been somewhat on an equal playing field. It's never been that way. So I don't know what the fuck they're talking about. They're talking about them. They're not talking about everybody else. They're talking about their people. They're talking about um, when during the what's it called, the Detroit. Remember the auto during the auto era. All middle class white people had jobs and vacations, and some black people too. But that shit wasn't nationwide. Yeah, a lot of black people in Detroit had good jobs there, worked for factories for Ford or whatever. But that wasn't in every fucking state. That's my point. That shit wasn't everywhere. Growing up in the 1980s, Giocho said, I saw people go to college. They graduated and they got a job. That was it. 1980s, crack era. They were able to move out on their own and start a life for themselves. So I think about our economics, how much better our economics were. Now, Giocho noted, American families are experiencing a boomerang syndrome. Recent graduates who have moved back in with their parents because they cannot make enough money to support themselves and pay off college debt. Shannon Kranick, a retail consultant in Festus, Missouri, says she believes making America great again means putting an end to all of the hate that has come around in the last few years, making it safe to walk down the street again, less debt, secure borders, more support for the military, freedom of speech coming back, better help for the poor, and people loving each other again. Look, and that's, it sounds all good and well, But my thing is this: putting an end to all the hate that has come around the last few years. Just that slogan alone is exciting the people who generally hate. So I don't understand how the fuck this lady's gonna say putting an end to hate when hateful people are promoting your fucking saying. So how do you put a stop to hate when hateful people are actually promoting these very words? Making it safe to walk down the street again. For who? For who? For you or for us? Because I know one thing's for sure. If you were walking down the street and something happened to you, I'm pretty sure that not only would it be on the news, but they're gonna find out what happened. If not nothing at all. But are you referring to the African Americans who get shot on the street unarmed, making it safe for them too? I don't understand who she's referring to. Less debt, less debt. Okay, so do white people in middle class homes? A retail consultant. She's a retail consultant, so I'm gonna assume she's middle class. So is there a huge deficit and crazy debt in white middle class that I didn't know about? I mean, I'm not saying every white middle class is balling out of control, but last time I checked, there's more white middle class neighborhoods than anything else out here. Last time I checked, secure borders, the same thing. The same thing. I don't understand how people talk crazy about people who try to come somewhere because they're leaving fucking hell. Because where they're from is hell. I just don't understand that. More support for the military. Since when the military needs help? Has the military been losing fucking battles? I don't understand. What? Since when the military been catching L's? When has the military been losing? More support. Okay, so support, that means they're lacking it. When have they been fucking up and losing? I guarantee right now the death toll of Americans and ISIS, I guarantee ISIS has lost more people. And the wars before that too, Iraq, I guarantee Iraqi people have lost more people. Any war um, the Americans have won just because not only do they have the technological advances, but like I said, I just don't understand how anybody needs more support for the military when the military is doing just goddamn fine. Freedom of speech coming back. Does that mean you can say something and not get shot and put in jail for it? Because I don't know, I just didn't know when they started putting middle-aged white women in jail for saying what they wanted to say. Never knew that. Never knew that was a problem. Better help for the poor and people loving each other again. Like I said, this all sounds sweet, and that would be cool, Miss Shannon Kranich. But what's unfortunate is the very message that you see such endearing terminology and energy, the very message is endorsed by the people who hate other races of people. Hence the alt-right, Ku Klux Klan, and Donald Trump. These people don't like black people. Why? It's because you don't see them with black people, and they condemn anything that has to do with African American people or dark-skinned people. But then we are supposed to support such a statement that derives from such hate. Doesn't make too much sense. So let's move on. Disdain for the recognition of human rights. That is the second characteristic of fascism. The disdain for the recognition of human rights. Because of fear of enemies and the need for security, the people in fascist regimes are persuaded that human rights can be ignored in certain cases because of that quote-unquote need. The people tend to look the other way or even approve of torture, summary executions, assassinations, long incarcerations of prisoners, etc. Alright, well, is that going on today, ladies and gentlemen? Is that going on today? Ladies and gentlemen? Is that going on today? In his first 4 months in office, President Donald Trump has shaken America's democratic foundations at home and abandoned a powerful bipartisan commitment to human rights. Seemingly forgotten is the legacy of Ronald Reagan, who is, in his first inaugural address, pledged that America would be the exemplar of freedom and a beacon of hope for oppressed populations around the world. Now, Trump seems indifferent to, and at times disdainful, for this deeply rooted global commitment. He begs of mentioning human rights publicly, as he did on Sunday in Rajya, where he spoke to Arab and Muslim leaders from around the world. We're not here to lecture, he said. We're not here to tell other people how to live, what to do, or who to be, or how to worship. Instead, we are here to offer partnership based on shared interest and values to pursue a better future for us all. But Trump has developed a habit of embracing those whose values are anti-ethical to our own. Right? He repeatedly expressed his admiration for the Russian President Vladimir Putin. I quote unquote quote I do respect him. Trump told Bill O'Reilly end quote in February, but he's a innocent. Trump welcomed to the White House the Egyptian President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi, a leader who has locked up tens and thousands of political opponents, decimated the human rights community, and severely undermined Egypt's democratic institutions. In their Oval Office meeting, Trump enthusiastically embraced Sisi, calling him somebody that's been very close to me from the first time I met him. In late April, Trump reached out to Rodrigo Duterte, the the what is it? The mercurial, that's what it was, the mercurial leader of the Philippines, who has invoked Hitler's mass extermination of Jews as a model for how he would like to dispose of drug dealers and addicts. I'm going to repeat that. Rodrigo Duterte, the mercurial leader of the Philippines, who has invoked Hitler's mass extermination of Jews as a model for how he would like to dispose of drug dealers and addicts. In what White House aides called a friendly conversation, Trump congratulated Duterte for doing an unbelievable job on the drug problem and invited him to visit. And last month, the President Recep Tayyip Erdogan of Turkey to congratulate him for winning a much disputed referendum that will solidify his autocratic rule and further erode the country's democratic institutions. Since a failed coup attempt last July, Erdogan has sacked academics and thousands of judges and other public officials. Earlier this month, Trump welcomed Erdogan to the White House, a visit that was marred by an attack on peaceful demonstrators outside the Turkish embassy by his security agents. In keeping with this pattern, Trump delivered his first major foreign policy address to government leaders from the Arab and Muslim world, calling for a principled realism rooted in common values, shared interests, and common sense. It makes sense for the president to talk about shared interest in regional security, in fighting terrorism, and in challenging Iran's misadventures in Syria and Iraq, and its support for Hezbollah. But shared values? According to Freedom House, Saudi Arabia is the 11th least free nation on earth, a place where free speech, assembly, and association are a distant dream. Religious tolerance is non-existent, and gender discrimination is pervasive. Much of Trump's speech was a call to isolate and weaken ISIS and other violent extremist groups by denying them financial support. We must strip them of their access to funds, he urged, failing to acknowledge even implicitly that the Saudis have doled out tens of billions of dollars in recent years to support spread of Wahhabism, a puritanical strain of Islam, underwriting thousands of religious schools and mosques throughout the Arab and greater Islam world. A number of these institutions have served as recruiting havens for violent extremists. So how do we condone these things? How do we talk about stripping them and access of funds and talking to people that are part of contributing. It's crazy. Now, perhaps the most distressing is the president's seeming lack of understanding of the root causes of the violent extremism that has plagued the Middle East and South Asia for decades, much less a willingness to confront them. As Ban Ki-moon, the United Nations Secretary General at the time, wrote last year, violent extremism tends to thrive in an environment characterized by poor governance, democracy deficits, corruption, and culture of impunity for unlawful behavior engaged in by the state or its agents. Elliot Abrams, a senior official in the George W. Bush administration, addressed this point in reaction to Trump's speech in Saudi Arabia, saying that the president's approach would work if terrorists were coming from outer space and our task was solely to organize against them militarily. There was no doubt part of the task, but that's not all of it, because they are coming from within the societies whose leaders he was addressing. He offered no explanation of what was producing this phenomenon. So, because they were coming from within the societies of whose leaders he was addressing, he offered no explanation. Now, Trump assumes that foreign policy boils down to national security and economic interests, and that everything else, especially attention to human rights and democracy, is a distraction. Earlier this month, Secretary of State Rex Tillerson told State Department employees that pursuing such issues really created obstacles in achieving what is best for America. The two-dimensional worldview was on clear display in Rajah, as Trump declined, even by inference, to challenge the Muslim leaders on their own bleak human rights records, or to point out the link between their failures and the pervasive violence extremism in their region. Trump is right to recognize that America's strategic and economic interests are vital and oftentimes primary, that the government often does need to engage their autocratic states to protect them. Yet, ignoring human rights, his administration misses a valuable opportunity to advance these very interests. So, and then also just to touch on it on a domestic level, we've heard of the five people that were accused of murder in, I want to say it was like the mid '80s or the '90s, and Donald Trump put out PSAs. He got magazines out, like, articles out, because he wanted to. Basically, he was condemning these guys. He was saying that these guys murdered these people, and they were, and he wanted them to get the death penalty. Well, come to find out, DNA proved these people were innocent, and proved that they weren't part of this murder. But like I said, is that the encouragement of death of people that not only you don't know the whole story, but you're spending money running around town, putting up PSAs and taking up full page ads, calling for the death of these people. When come to find out, DNA exonerated them. Drug dealers, he's trying to push for the death penalty for drug dealers right now, and he said he got that from the people in China. That how in China they just kill. Well, what about the dudes what about the drug makers? What about the drug makers who are the pharmaceutical companies? What about them? They don't get the death penalty? Only the people that sell this shit on the street illegally? What about the ones who make the shit? That's like saying, if I sell cigarettes, what about them? What about the motherfuckers who sell cigarettes and alcohol and Bud Light? What about the owners of Bud Light who are responsible for not only DUIs, but people dying in car wrecks every fucking year, dying of heart failure, liver damage, you name it, broken families, abuse, you name it. What about all that? Assaults. What about all that? Them people they don't face any repercussions when they're selling death and poison by the billions of dollars. What about the pharmaceutical companies that are selling all these Oxycontins and Lortabs that are killing people left and right legally? They don't get the death penalty? That's okay. We're normalizing that. But then we're going to kill the street dudes who are running around selling the shit out of survival. Are the Bud Light people trying to survive, or are they thriving? What's the difference? What's the difference? What's the difference between a drug dealer and the Bud Light fucking CEO? What's the difference between a crack dealer and the doctor who's slanging lure tabs? What's the fucking difference? It's just one is legal and the other one is not. One has a fucking white coat on and the government's behind him, and the other one doesn't. That's it. That's it. But to normalize it, the you know, the disregard of human life on the low level survival crimes, and then ignoring the big pharmaceuticals who make money hand over fist in death. And they're wearing suits, but they're making money, billions of dollars, while you dying. And everybody around you dying because they are prescribed the shit they're making. But then the fucking old fucking shorty, if he's selling the shit on the street, he gets the death penalty? He gets the death penalty? That shit don't make any sense to me. How many people does Marlboro fucking cigarettes kill a year? And nobody's responsible for those deaths. But somehow fucking Shorty's responsible for the same people who decide to come to him. The same way the same people decide to buy cigarettes and beer. How much sense does that make? How much fucking sense does that make? How much sense does that make? It doesn't. We're on to number 3 now. Number 3, the third characteristics of fascism is the identification of enemies, scapegoats, as a unifying cause. The people are rallied into a unifying patriotic frenzy over the need to eliminate a perceived common threat or foe, racial, ethnic, or religious minorities, liberals, communists, socialists, terrorists, etc. Let's break that down. Let's break that down. Now, so understand why. Why is it that Trump hates goddamn Mexicans so much? Can somebody explain that to me? So, the president had kicked off his presidential bid more than a year ago with harsh words for Mexico. They are not our friends, believe me, he said. Before disparaging Mexican immigrants, they're bringing drugs, they're bringing crime, they're rapists, and some, I assume, are good people. So here we go. Here we go. What's the element? The people are rallied into unifying in a patriotic frenzy. The people are rallied into unifying in a patriotic frenzy over the need to eliminate a perceived common threat. Okay? And what's the threat? What's the threat? What's the threat? And what's the threat? He says, Mexico, they are not your friend. He says, believe me. Right? He says they're bringing drugs, they're bringing crime, they're rapists. And some, I assume, are good people. So, already implying the fact that there is a problem and they need to be eliminated, and they're perceived as a common threat or a foe. And it has to do with the whole race of people, with the whole ethnicity of people. Right? In the months since, he has repeatedly promised to build a wall alongside the Mexican border and get Mexico to pay for it. He is now scheduled to meet with Mexican President on Wednesday, hours before a speech that will aim to clarify his position on immigration. And we know that that meeting did not go well. And like I said, it's the same initiative. Let's rally the whole country to build a wall to separate ourselves from our foe, our enemy, who is bringing drugs. And for some, I didn't even know there was this huge rape Mexican. I guess what? There's a bunch of Mexican people just raping a shitload of white people. Is that what's going on? Did not know about that. Did not know about that. I didn't know there was just a rampant fucking rape stat about Mexicans, with white people and American people. They just run around raping the shit out of Americans. Ain't that some shit? Never heard of that statistic. If somebody could send me the link to it, I'd appreciate it, because I never knew that. And I'm being fucking sarcastic as shit, because that shit don't exist. Mexican people are not running around here. Hold on, y'all need to see me on this one. Mexicans are not running around raping a shitload of fucking American people, let alone white people. That is not a statistic. Yes, it probably happens, but it is not happening at the magnitude this piece of shit is talking about. Trying to make it seem like all those people are fucking rapists. He's the fucking rapist. He's the one running around grabbing women by the pussy, buying women, buying Russian women and shit, naming his daughter a Russian name. That dude's just a pervert. So we're not gonna talk about some fake ass statistics. We're gonna talk about some real ass shit. So, sadly, the overwhelming amount of violent crime in our major cities is committed by blacks and Hispanics. A tough subject must be discussed. This is what Trump had said about Mexico and Mexicans before and during his presidential campaign. He said, sadly, the overwhelming amount of violent crime in our major cities is committed by blacks and Hispanics. A tough subject must be discussed. Okay. Did we not just see in Vegas a record fucking number of mass shooting? Was that done by a black person or Hispanic? Okay. What about the other shooting that happened at that school? Was that a white person? I mean, a black person or Hispanic? Didn't think so. What about majority of the mass fucking shootings that have happened in this goddamn country? Were they done by Hispanics or goddamn black people? Didn't fucking think so. The same elements of driving a group of people to hate another group of people is the third element of motherfucking fascism. These are the same things that motherfuckers like Adolf was doing, Mussolini was doing, where they take one person and a group of people and then rally them up and engage them with fucking hate, manifest as much hate as they can. That's why Make America Great to them means all Hispanics are fucking criminals. All black people are criminals. We need a wall. That's what the fuck it means. It ain't got shit to mean about loving anybody. How does any of this rhetoric speak love? The overwhelming amount of violent crimes in the major cities committed by blacks and Hispanics. Just to paint a broad stroke like that. How is that? Okay. Sure. Okay. So, what about the motherfucking nasty ass pedophiles running around out here? Statistically, I'd like to assume there's more fucking Caucasian fucking white men that are on the sexual offenders list. So now, should I run around and start saying that all white men are goddamn perverts and want to fuck little kids? Should I say that? Should I say that there's an overwhelming amount of fucking pedophiles and most of them are white people? We need to address this. Should I start doing some wild shit like that? No, because that's fucked up and it's painting a broad stroke. Even though statistically that's what the case is, do you see me running around encouraging that shit? No. So that's my fucking point. When will the U.S. stop sending money to our enemies, Mexico and others? Donald Trump said this July 10th, 2014. The Mexican legal system is corrupt, as is much of Mexico. Pay me the money that is owed me now and stop sending criminals over our border. Here we go again, villainizing the whole people. Mexico's court system is corrupt. I want nothing to do with Mexico other than to build an impenetrable wall and stop them from ripping off U.S. But yet again, solidifying the fact that all of these people to him are illegitimate. The border is wide open for cartels and terrorists. Secure our border now, build a massive wall, and deduct the cost from Mexican foreign aid. He talks about terrorists. What about domestic terrorists? What about these school shooters? Can you build a wall for them too? What about them? Huh? What about them? June 16, 2015. When do we beat Mexico at the border? They're laughing at us, at our stupidity, Trump said as he announced his candidacy. And now they're beating us economically, which is not true. They're not our friend, believe me. They're killing us economically. The U.S. has become a dumping ground for everybody else's problems. When Mexico sends its people, they're not sending their best. He said in the same speech, they're not sending you. They're not sending you. They're sending people that have lots of problems. They're bringing those problems with us. They're bringing drugs. They're bringing crime, rapists, and I assume some of those people are good. Mexican governors, I'm assuming government, doesn't want me talking about terrible border situation and horrible trade deals, forcing Univision to get me to stop. No way. I can keep going. I love the Mexican people, but Mexico is not our friend. They're killing us at the border, and they're killing us on jobs and trade. Fight. Mexican leaders and negotiators are much tougher and smarter than those of the U.S. Mexico is killing us on jobs and trade. Wake up. El Chapo and Mexican drug cartels use the border unimpeded like it was a vacuum cleaner, sucking drugs and death right into the U.S. Well, I can keep going. I can just keep going. So, for us to not assume that this is not a way of rallying a certain level of patriotic frenzy for the need to eliminate a perceived common threat or a foe, which is racially charged, ethnically charged. I don't know what else spells out the element of identifying the enemy and scapegoat as unifying cause of fascism. Supremacy of the military. That is the fourth element of fascism. The supremacy of the military. And like I touched on earlier, most these wars that America has been going through these past 50 years, I think they've done pretty well. And for anybody else to assume that they don't have some kind of military dominance and they're lacking it, like I said, it's just speaking more to the fact that they want a certain type of level of dictatorship and totalitarianism. It looks as if President Trump will get the military parade he has coveted for months, but will not be on the earth, but will not be on the 4th of July, and will not include the tanks. Instead, plans are underway to hold a plain-field display on Veterans Day in Washington, according to the Pentagon memo sent to the chairman. The memo, with Thursday's date, says its purpose to provide initial guidance for the planning and execution of a process that would run from the White House to the Capitol and integrated with the city's annual Veterans Day parade. Now, Medal of Honor recipients and veterans organizations are to be included. The march, which according to the memo will feature a heavy dose of history. The parade will focus on the contributions by veterans throughout the history of the U.S. military, starting from the Revolutionary War and the War of 1812, with an emphasis on the price of freedom, the memo said. Okay, so I don't know about y'all, but the only countries that I ever see do this type of shit, the only type of countries I ever see this type of shit are fascist countries, communist countries, to try to flex that army muscle. And so obviously, just like the young fascist in training, Carrot Top, obviously old Carrot Top, the young fascist in training, he's taking a he's taking a note from his old, for the OGs, right? He's taking he said, I need to figure it out. So he took a page out of the OG's book in regards to flexing that muscle. I don't know if y'all remember, Adolf Hitler used to do these type of things. Mussolini used to do these type of things. North Korea still do these type of things. They all do. Them big fascist communist countries love doing these military parades. And you know what? Just coincidentally enough, old Carrot Top thought it would be a great idea to do the same thing. Now, in practice, that means period uniforms, reenactments, and even the use of an old guard fife and drum, and the memo says. The parade will also highlight the evolution of women veterans from the separate formations in World War II. It will close with a heavy air component, which officials hope will include other old planes. Why no tanks? Consideration must be given to minimize damage to local infrastructure, the memo notes. His inaugural committee reported explored but rejected the idea of highlighting military equipment in his inaugural parade. Then in July, Trump watched Bastille Day, a celebration in Paris, and days later called it one of the most beautiful parades I've ever seen, adding that we should do one day in Pennsylvania Avenue. So, 2 months later, while making remarks at the United Nations, Trump said he was actually looking into staging a 4th of July parade, noting that again he had gotten the idea after watching the Bastille Day event. Finally, last month, Defense Secretary Jim Mattis acknowledged that the Pentagon had been putting together some options for an event which had been sent to the White House. Soon after that, Mr. Trump told Fox News that he would forego the idea if it cannot be done at a reasonable cost, which might help explain the decision to integrate the new parade, which one that already exists. Now, military parades in the U.S. have traditionally followed the end of wars. In '91, Bush hosted a $12 million demonstration of military prowess after the end of the Persian Gulf War. Other places in the world, though, are no stranger to military parades. In addition to France's Bastille Day celebration, China held a huge military parade last summer, and in May, Russian leaders organized a large military parade through the Red Square. Isn't that crazy? North Korea also frequently puts on displays of its military hardware, highlighting the nation's missile capabilities by driving them down the streets of Pyongyang. Well, ain't that some shit? Doing the same shit that motherfucking China, Russia, France, and North Korea do. That's fucking, that's innovative. You're following some goddamn communist countries and the actions they take to flex muscle. Fucking genius. This guy's he's original. You know what I'm saying? Like, I get why y'all voted him in. He's original. Rampant sexism. The governments of fascist nations tend to be almost exclusively male-dominated. Under fascist regimes, traditional gender roles are made more rigid. Opposition to abortion is high, as is homophobia and anti-gay legislation and national policy. Alright? Now, the hazards of military worship. That's one thing I didn't mention. Now, this guy right here is saying that he was guilty of it himself. Commanding a small cavalry troop, about 85 soldiers in the southwest Kandahar province back in 2011, I certainly wondered and requested more. More troopers, more special force advisors, more Afghan police, more air support, more supplies, more money, more everything. Like so many others in Afghanistan back then, I wanted whatever resources would protect my guys in my unit and fend off the insurgent threat. No one, of course, asked me if the U.S. military should even be there, nor did I presume to raise that question. I was, after all, just a captain dug into a tough fight in a dangerous district. It's funny, though. People sometimes ask me now, what's really going on in Afghanistan? They ask the same question about Iraq, where I led a unit back in 2006 through 2007. I mean, the implication is, if you served over there, unlike those quote-unquote liberal pundits and politicians who regularly mouth off on the subject, who would know better? But I've learned over the years that what they don't want to hear is my real answer to such questions. So I rarely bother to tell them that historians, analysts, and thoughtful critics, even ones who have been within thousands of miles of our war zones, probably understand the big picture better than most soldiers. This is coming from a soldier. This is coming from a soldier. Okay? This has been written by Dan Sigerson. He is a U.S. Army strategist and former history instructor at West Point. Look this man up. Dan Sigerson, U.S. Army strategist and former history instructor at West Point. Okay, so now don't give me the emails. Don't send me the emails. He's saying himself that since by him serving and commanding a troop of 85 soldiers, he has understood the fact that analysts He's understood the fact that critics, thoughtful critics that is, historians, and the ones that haven't been thousands of miles, the ones that are thousands of miles away, they understand and have probably the they understand the big picture better than most of the soldiers. That's the dirty little secret of Americans' wars. Despite the omniscient claims of some veterans, most soldiers see their vision of war as if gazing through a straw at 30,000 feet. Combat and dedication to your unit and mission naturally steer you towards such tunnel vision. And just pause right there. I got to pause right there. That is the same mentality that is taken into our police force too. The police force is the same thing. That's why all these unarmed shootings keep happening, and people keep going home and no one is convicted. And these police officers who are shooting unarmed people, not only are they getting paid fucking leave, but they get to go home. Is because of this tunnel vision that they create here. Is because when they're on the ground, all they're trying to do is just take care of each other, and they're not looking at the big picture. And that's not their fault, but it is at the same goddamn time. You know, I'm not gonna play that shit. Now, so, and here's the sad thing that no one wants to admit, right? That mantra applies strongly to generals as to sergeants. And if you don't believe me, just check out our wars of the last 15 years. So it's worrisome when president after president defers to and all too often hides behind the supposed wisdom of active and retired 3- and 4-star flagged officers. Don't get me wrong, some of these guys can be impressive. No one is perfect, but former chairman of the Joint Chiefs General Martin Dempsey was a gem with genuine scholarly and combat bona fides. But consider him and a few others the exceptions that proved the rule, which is why civilian control of the military and of the policy-making process that goes with the military action is not just a constitutional imperative, but desirable for thoroughly practical reasons. I'm going to repeat that. Which is why civilian control of the military and of the policy-making process that goes with military action, it's not just a constitutional imperative, but desirable for thoroughly practical reasons, which, in turn, is why the makeup of the current administration, with an unprecedented number of generals in key positions, raises some serious questions. And yet, the problem is so much bigger than that. Somehow, and this should be truly unnerving, Americans have gotten to a place where it seems they trust only soldiers. And just in June 2016, for instance, a Gallup poll found that 73% of Americans had quite a lot of confidence in the military versus 36% for the presidency and 6% for Congress. Such disparities ought to inspire distress about the direction of our public institutions, but rarely do. See, when pause. So when people glorify the army nowadays, it's looked at as patriotic. It's looked at as, you know, you are, you know, that's home field. Like, what the fuck is your problem, right? But see, like this dude is not only is a goddamn soldier himself, but he is telling you that the civilian outlook is more of a balanced outlook as opposed to a military outlook, because a military outlook is going to be biased. A civilian outlook is unbiased. It's unfucking biased. Where the nation puts its money both reflects this reality and aggravates it. Oh man, when I read this article the first time, I said, this motherfucker got it right here, man. I said, I'm gonna fuck with him because I know he got it. Where the nation puts its money both reflects this reality and aggravates it. Consider that in this fiscal year, military spending exceeded $600 billion, or 12 times the State Department's budget. Worse still, the new president's proposed budget would cut state by more than 1/3, despite former Secretary of Defense Bob Gates' quip that there are already members of military bands than there are already more members of military bands than foreign service officers. Now, the myth of infallible military judgment. By now, it's part of American lore that facing a thorny problem or potential conflict abroad, a president should throw some stars at it. If only generals were indeed pixie dust. Historically speaking, though, since World War II, calling on the generals has often resulted in abject failure. Now, there's plenty of evidence of that in the last 15 years of, at best, inconclusive war in the greater Middle East. But first, let's take a brief tour of our military advice from previous centuries' crisis. So, I'm not going to go too deep in the rest of this because now he's going to get specific in regards to the generals and how, it's a mess. These motherfuckers don't know what they're doing, and some of them have been legally deemed insane, like straight up. Like, so I'm gonna read a couple of them. So MacArthur in Korea. In October 1950, just months after the Korean War began, President Harry Truman met General Douglas MacArthur, commander of the coalition forces in Korea on Wake Island. These MacArthur assured that the president of two things: that the Chinese would not intervene in the war, and that fighting would be over by Christmas. A month later, hundreds of thousands of Chinese volunteers streamed across the Yalu River into the northern Korea, sending MacArthur's troops into a headlong retreat. Wrong once, the general prompted called for a massive U.S. troop escalation and the bombing of China, perhaps even nuclear attacks on that country. Truman recoiled, fired the general, and opened negotiations, all while avoiding nuclear war. And what happened to the twice royal MacArthur? In April 1951, with the war still underway, and armistice wouldn't finally come until 1953, he received a record-breaking 19-mile-long ticker tape parade through New York City in which 3,249 tons of paper rained down on him. So he fucked up and received a 19-mile-long ticker tape fucking parade in New York City in 1953. So what they tell you damn sure ain't what the fuck happened. Ike versus the generals. President Dwight Eisenhower so loved the army that he asked his successor to return. He returned to him as a 5-star rank. That way, he had addressed as general rather than Mr. President in retirement. Yet no president was more dismissive of the notion that military men rather than civilians know what's best. When a senator contended that the Air Force was better positioned than politicians to assess its own needs, like Ike snapped back bunk. He knew the Pentagon regularly overstated its case. As for sage military advice, Eisenhower dismissed General Mark Clark's plans for an all-out assault in Korea as madness and sacked all his service chiefs after they revolted over a truncated defense budget he proposed. Now, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, Admiral Arthur Radford, even hinted that it might be high time to re-examine the taboo against using nuclear weapons in that war. Despite significant saber-rattling, Ike ultimately chose restraint. In fact, he was notoriously skeptical of his general's advice and left office famously warning Americans about a growing military-industrial complex. I'm going to repeat that. In fact, he was notoriously skeptical of his general's advice and left office famously warning Americans about a growing military-industrial complex. The result of his presidency, the commanding general and hero of World War II held down defense spending, never used nukes, ended the bloody stalemate of war, and in Korea, and most importantly, avoided World War III. Kennedy and the Joint Chiefs deal with Cuba. Okay, so I can keep going in regards to the lack of when it comes to these generals. So I'm gonna hit up here. So now we're gonna hit up the sixth element. The sixth element is controlled mass media. Sometimes the media is directly controlled by the government, but in other cases the media is indirectly controlled by government regulation or sympathetic media spokespeople and executive. Censorship, especially in wartime, is very common. But controlled mass media, okay? That's the next one, right? That's the next one. And then also just even in regards to the sexism, the rampant sexism, You know, I might as well go ahead and touch on this one right here. No pun intended. But these are all the comments that um, y'all's president has made in regards to the rampant sexism. Okay, we're gonna go to the '80s. Um, all the way from the '80s. Louise Sunshine, who had worked with Trump in '73 and '85, told Washington Post that the billionaire kept a fat picture of her in his desk drawer that he would take out when she did something he didn't like. She said it was a reminder that I wasn't perfect and added that she still remembers it to this day. When I gain weight, I think of that picture. The president called Sunshine's story totally false and ridiculous. In 1990, when he belittled his wife. In an interview in Vanity Fair while he was still married to Ivana, a gallant Trump said, "I would never buy Ivana any decent jewels or pictures. Why give her negotiable assets?" In '91, when he called women beautiful pieces of ass. Back when George H. Bush was U.S. President, Trump spoke to Esquire magazine about the media. "You know, it doesn't really matter what they write as long as you've got a young and beautiful piece of ass." He is currently married to 47-year-old former supermodel Melania. 92, when he reduced an Olympian to her looks. According to the New York Magazine, in November '92, Trump said that German gold medal winning Olympic ice skater Katrina Witt was wonderfully looking while on the ice, but up close and personal, she could only be described as attractive if you like a woman with bad complexion who's built like a linebacker. Uh, I'm not saying that I'd never say some shit like this, but like I said, to say this shit in public and about people, it just says more to who the fuck you are. '92, he knows he's a public figure. Interview with New York Magazine, Trump uttered his charming phrase about women: "You have to treat them like shit," quote unquote, in a magazine. In '93, this is when he was self-aware. An interview with the New Zealand TV station shows a rare glimmer of self-awareness of a 47-year-old Trump, damn near 50 years old, and makes a mockery of his claims during an election campaign that any past locker room banter had no impact on his ability to run an office. In the '90s footage, Trump was asked about his image as a womanizer. He replied, "I don't enjoy that image. Yes, I have that image. I think women are beautiful. I think certain women are more beautiful than others, to be perfectly honest, and it's unfortunate I don't have to run for political office." So he's saying that he loves women, and back then it was fortunate for him that he didn't have to fuck with political office. Um, I can keep going, folks. I have days where I have days if I come home, I don't want I don't want to sound too much like a chauvinist, the president said, but when I come home and dinner's not ready, I go through the roof. He was married to Marla Staples at the time. In the same interview, he compared women to buildings and added that he gets bored when they become successful. "I think that putting a wife to work is a very dangerous thing," said Trump. "Unfortunately, after they're a star, the fun is over for me. It's like a creation process. It's almost like creating a building. It's pretty sad." Wow. Wow. Um, I mean, I can just keep going, folks. When he bought Miss USA, they said, "How are you going to change the pageant?" I said, "I'm going to get the bathing suits to be smaller and the heels to be higher." He later added, "If you're looking for rocket sciences, don't tune in tonight. But if you're looking for really beautiful women, you should watch." When talking about nailing Princess Diana, same Howard Stern interview, Trump also responded to a question about Princess of Wales. "Why do people think it's egotistical of you to say you could have gotten with Lady Di?" Stern asked him. "You could have gotten with her, right? You could have nailed her." "I think I could have." When he joked that dating girls under 17. In 1999, according to New York Daily News, Trump said he promised his daughter Ivanka that he would never date anyone younger than her. "I have a deal with her. She's 17 and doing great, Ivanka. She made me promise swear to her that I would never date a girl younger than her," Trump said. "So as she grows older, the field is getting very limited." Oh my God. At the time, Trump was dating a 29-year-old Melania, who would become his third wife. He was 53. Ugh, that's so nasty. Melania was 29 when she was banging his nasty, pasty ass. Ugh. He know that was nothing but the money. When he rated women he wanted to have sex with. I mean, I can go on the rampant sexism. So now back to the controlled mass media. That's where we were. Back to the controlled mass media. You know what? Matter of fact, I gotta go. So this is what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna stop at the 6. I'm gonna stop at element 6, and I'm gonna do the rest, part 2, and I'm gonna come back with it. So, folks, like I said, I'm not over here just trying to talk shit about somebody. I'm showing y'all the correlations, and I'm showing y'all how all of this is unfortunately tying into the same ideologies as the Mussolinis, as the Hitlers. As you know, it's ridiculous of how similar these people fucking act. Excuse me. And so the methods the methods to the madness, this guy's broken down into 14. And like I said, we're on number 6. Look, the shit says it for itself. Take any president for that matter and try to compare him like that. Use the 14 elements and compare him. You can take Obama, take whoever the fuck you want, Bush, Clinton, take them all and compare them like that and see what happens. See if any of them do what the same, do they correlate? Are they rampant sexism? Is it powerful and continuing nationalism, screaming about making America great again, or something similar that has somewhat of a dog whistle effect when it's said? That some people hear it one way, and then a whole nother fucking people hear it another way. The disdain and recognition of human rights. Is there a correlation with other presidents who did the same thing? The identification of enemies, scapegoats, and unifying causes. Or did all these presidents blame a certain race of people and a religion of people and demonize and criminalize them? Are all presidents doing that, or is it certain leaders who do that? You guys got to compare and contrast these things. The supremacy of the military. What presidents are constantly trying to glorify the initiative of a ultimate fucking military, right? Who's always trying to do shit like that? Compare and contrast. Now we're at rampant sexism. Who is always displaying acts and gestures of rampant sexism, of always degradation, of condescending of one gender than the next, of always keeping one side of gender at a level of supremacy and dominance as opposed to any other? Who's doing all that? Compare and contrast your leaders. That's the only way you can find out the truth and if these motherfuckers are there for your interest or just their own. But one thing's for sure is, if you sit here and you follow the bullshit and you don't think for yourself, if you sit here and believe in fucking phrases that people throw out at you and you act like them phrases are the saviors of your life, when you don't try to understand the rest of the world that you live in, is when you fall into these categories. So folks, be smart. I'll be back with part 2 of fascism. What is it? Fascism Anyone? Yeah, that's what it is. Fascism Anyone? Fascism Anyone? I'll be back with part 2, man. Real shit, though. Real shit. So I'll see y'all next time. Part 2. Peace.